And I'm joined today with Ron Funches, all the way in Los Angeles. Ron, how are you keeping?
I'm doing very well, man. You first of all, I just love the fact that you pronounce my name correctly. There's a lot of television shows I go on that don't do that. So I appreciate that right away.
And there's a guy from Northern Ireland got it first go.
Yes.
Ron is actually basically the first person to reach back from my Fuck It Friday, which I do, where I DM a comedian or musician or actor, anybody that I kind of look up to in some regard. And I say, I know I have no business being in your DMs right now, but, I have a podcast. Everyone's on lockdown. And, if you came to do it, it'd be really cool. So Ron fucking reached out and here he is. Thank you very much, man.
No problem. It's worked. It's a good lesson for a lot of people, especially that's a lot of how dating can go. Sometimes you're afraid to get into them DMs, but you came respectfully. You came honestly. You didn't show me your dick. I appreciated that right away. And I was like, well, I'm bored. Why not? So
I think it was
that's
like
a lesson for all men.
it's like a soft DM. It's like it's not an aggressive like straight in there. It's like if you react to a story maybe or something like that, that's a little bit
Yeah,
more kind of reserved.
fish. You gotta fish them in. Yeah.
Exactly. But Ron, so you're living in LA right now. You started stand up I believe in Chicago, wasn't it?
No, I grew up in Chicago, but
Grew
I
up in Chicago,
started comedy in Portland, Oregon.
Portland, Oregon. And
Mm-hmm.
were you moving to Portland for like college or
Just basically, my dad was living out there. I moved when I was 13 years old to go live out with him, and just ended up out there for years, and yeah, just end up getting a family, married, had a little son, and then always knew I wanted to do stand up. And so one time I went to Harvey's open mic in Portland, Oregon, in the U.S., and just fell in love with it. Was addicted from the minute I got on stage, and I just remember I felt a high that I never felt before, and that I knew that I had parked my car just like around the block, but I couldn't find it for like 30 or 40 minutes, and I didn't care. I was like, I don't care if I ever found it, because I found what I want to do with my life. And so I spent the next 5 years trying to recreate that feeling, but I still remember it to this day.
is it crazy how you just kind of know from the first time on stage doing stand up whether it goes great or terrible? For some reason people just know there and then.
Yeah, and I always have more of a respect for the people who it doesn't go well. Like, I know a lot of comedians, their first time it goes well, and it gives them the like courage and confidence to keep going when it stops going well, when you stop having the beginner's luck. And I had a few friends like who, like, from the get-go, they were always bombing, but they still loved it, and they were like, I'm determined to figure this out. And I always kind of like people who worked hard, even if they didn't necessarily wasn't as inclined at it automatically. But for me, it was just really awesome because I was like, I've never been good at anything that is marketable. And so when I went there, I was like, oh, I'm not great, but I'm kind of like naturally, I kind of understand a bit of it. It made me feel really good. Yeah.
Were you ever like on stage before that or anything like that, or was that your first experience?
Um, Not really, no. Like, I had never tried out for any plays or done anything like that. I was actually just telling my fiance that we were watching this Last Dance thing on ESPN about
Oh,
the
it's
Chicago
fantastic.
Bulls. It's amazing. And that's also a thing I love because I grew up in Chicago, so it's always a big deal for me. And it's so crazy to me to see, like, oh, like, there's people all over the world that claim Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan. And that makes me really happy. But I was telling her that, like, I was like, I had this flashback of like the first time I was ever told jokes in front of people was that I had to do like this little talent show in elementary school, and I had this joke book about Chicago Bulls jokes, and I just told these jokes about the Bulls, and it was just like ridiculous and stupid. But I was like, oh, that was the first time I ever did anything like that.
It's so weird that you say that because the first guest that I had on the podcast was actually you'll be very familiar, Rob Van Dam.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked about how when he thought about it, he could trace what he's doing right now to like very, very early childhood in terms of like he was going to like the English dubbed kind of like martial arts movies at the Chopsaki Theater in Michigan, and just had like a weird infatuation of it. But it was activating something in his brain, but he didn't know quite yet what that was going to be. And it could have been kickboxing, and then he turned to the professional wrestling route. And it's just crazy to think about how it's always kind of been there in a way.
Yeah, it's weird that a lot of times your life will train you for the thing that you're meant to do. And I think I'm a firm believer in people have callings and things that they're meant to do. And it's not everyone needs to be a wrestler or a comedian, of course, but like there's just things that you're kind of naturally inclined at that you grew up interested in. And sometimes we kind of turn away from that as we get a little bit older because there doesn't seem like there's money in those things, you know? But I think, yeah, if a lot of successful people, a lot of people who are doing the things they're passionate about, you can just really trace it back to like elementary school, if not younger, of them being like, oh, I just like this, you know?
Yeah. And so like you're in Portland and you're at Harvey's doing the open mic. And what prompted then the decision to move to LA?
I just started, getting better and better at comedy in Portland, and there was less things that I hadn't done there. I'd done the festivals there. I started traveling up and down the West Coast, doing shows in Seattle and down in San Francisco. And I was even starting to do some featuring on the road, going to Denver and stuff like that. And I just was like, I think there's a big timing when it comes to like, especially moving to LA. It's you really want to have your shit together. You want to have things going on
Yeah.
because if not, because there'll be a lot of time when you move down where things just don't seem like there's anything going on for you because nobody knows you yet. And so I just kind of waited. I had already been on Conan O'Brien and stuff like that, and so I was kind of like, oh, the reactions when I go on stage in Oregon are not truthful. They're kind of giving me the benefit of the doubt as soon as I step on stage because they're like, oh, this guy, he's our guy that's been on TV. So we love everything he does. And I was like, oh, that's not helping me grow. And so and it also, I guess the short answer is I was getting divorced. And so I
Uh-huh.
needed a place to live. And I was like, well, if I need to find a new place to live, I might as well go down to LA where I know I want to, I want to do some acting. I want to do some real stand up. So I might as well move down there.
So it's kind of like a reset almost, and it just so happened that you were going to the place where you were meant to be in terms of like the bigger pond as opposed to
Yeah.
Portland.
Yeah, exactly. Just resetting. And I mean, it was just a clear indication that it was time for me to move on, especially since my relationship was ending and everything was, a lot of my friends had already moved away. And so, I thought it was, now or never, basically.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I lived. I'm always fascinated with people's like kind of stories in the beginning of moving to kind of the big two of LA or New York because being from Ireland, there was only really the chance for me to go to America was on like a 1 year visa. So I
Mhm.
went on like a 1 year visa where I had to work at a company that was like related to my degree. So I kind of went for that. I worked in like an advertising firm, but the real reason I went to LA was for stand up. And I lived in a house with 40 people in Echo Park. And so I'm always like fascinated by people's like starts in LA. Like, what was it like for you moving out there, kind of solo dolo, and just kind of? Did you know anybody out there whenever you moved?
Yeah, I had a few friends from doing stand up and people who had moved down from Portland and just general people from stand up. And I had a manager at that point too, so that was very helpful. But for me, like it was a pretty fun story because I came down and my aunt was living in Pasadena and she was like, you can stay at our house. I'm not there. She wasn't even living there. It was just her housekeeper and her son living there. And then 2 days later, she was like, the housekeeper doesn't want you around anymore. So you gotta go. But luckily for me, there was another comedian that I knew from Portland that was kind of having the same situation, but in reverse. He was getting divorced, and he was deciding to move to South Dakota to go be closer to his family.
Okay.
And because he wanted to co-parent, and I knew I wasn't going to really be able to co-parent with my ex-wife, so I was moving to LA to hopefully, get my son, or have him at least visit me consistently. And so I kind of took his rooms, pretty much same situation, living with like 10, 12 comics in a house owned by a dude who was just a weirdo, and stayed there for several months, angry because I couldn't watch my professional wrestling, because every time I wanted to watch pro wrestling, somebody would come by and make fun of me.
Well,
I was like, this
that's the
isn't my
struggle.
home. Yeah, this isn't my house. Nobody would make fun of me watching professional wrestling in my house.
I know I'm the same. I watch it in my house right now, but all there is my mom and dad, so it doesn't really matter. I actually started, no joke, I was like, worst case scenario, if kind of quarantine is for, say, even till the end of this year, what can I do? And I decided to go on a task of watching the Monday Night Wars from start to finish. But the problem with that, though, is that you're starting at 1995, which is one of the toughest years to consume of pro wrestling.
Yeah, I've been watching a little bit of 95, and it's actually really funny because the WCW product is actually kind of a little bit better than I gave it credit for, because they still have the like Eddie Guerrero, but like a weird version of Eddie Guerrero where he's kind of pudgy and he doesn't know how to talk at all.
Yeah.
And it's so fun, but it makes me so happy because, like, as a comedian, especially out here in LA, it seems like a lot of the like business people are always like, this is who you are, and this is how you're always going to be, and so this is how we're going to pitch you to people. And I'm just like, man, no, people get better, people develop, people change. And watching that stuff with like Eddie Guerrero, where he's doing an interview going like, I'm just happy to be here. And then knowing that he becomes like Latino that he becomes like this larger than life character, and I was like, man, people get better and they start to get it together. And I wish, more people were interested in development like that.
Well, it's funny because Rob's one of the few people where it's like, people talk all the time in podcasts about the similarities between wrestling and stand-up comedy, even though they're two completely different art forms at face value. There is like a couple of connections here and there. And he was talking about how it's kind of the same in that every good stand-up that has a gimmick, or like has like a kind of trait that separates them from the rest. And I was like, I like blew my mind. I was like, he's totally right.
Yeah, whether it's like, I mean, a lot of that just breaks down the styles, like I don't consider, like, when you have a gimmick like Larry the Cable Guy or whatever, I'm not like, oh, he was an amazing, brilliant comedian, but he was well known for being able to differentiate himself. But I think it's like Mitch Hedberg, like he didn't have necessarily a gimmick, but he was completely different and completely himself, and he had his own rhythm. And I think you see that with the best comedians and the best wrestlers. And I think it's the way that I think the jobs are most similar is the fact that we both work for the reaction of the audience. That's our jobs as a comedian, as a wrestler, is that you're constantly trying to like work this rhythm out to like build this pop, bigger pop, and then in the hugest pop and good night.
Yeah.
It's the same whether it's wrestling or comedy.
I think too, like in terms of both kind of as like an interest, as like people taking an interest in pro wrestling or comedy, it's kind of like those that are in it are so fucking in it. And then those on the outside looking in are like, what the fuck is this? Like, how do people enjoy this? And they can't be explained to.
Yeah, you can't explain it to a person who doesn't want to like it, and you can't explain you can't make a person hate it that loves it. It's just you either in it or you're not. Like that was one of the most eye-opening things for me when I moved out here, because I was so like, I gotta build my reputation. People gotta know who I am. And then one time I went and was like doing a show, and I was flirting with this girl, and I was trying to name drop, and I was just like, yeah, I'm getting ready to go on the road with Aziz Ansari, da 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 da. And then this lady's like, who's Aziz Ansari? And I was like, you don't know Aziz Ansari? And she was like, who? And I was like, Parks and Rec, da 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 da. And she was like, oh, the brown guy on Parks and Rec. And I was like, holy shit, like this guy who I feel is that at the time, because this was like a few years ago, he was pretty much at the pinnacle of our business, and then still to the average everyday person, he was just the funny little brown guy on Parks and Rec. And I was like, oh shit, I got no hope. I might as well just not even worry about it and just enjoy me.
And it's the same with pro wrestling as well. If I was to like say to a girl in a bar, like, "Oh, I had an interview with Rob Van Dam last week," she'd be like, "Hey."
Yeah.
I feel like if she knew who he was, that's the person that you put a ring on. That's when you know what I mean?
Or you stay away from her. One of the two. She might know him too well.
It could be a red flag depending on how you look at it. That's so funny. And like, so like, how did you, like, what kind of drew you to pro wrestling in that sense? Because like you're a big fan, and like I would be the same myself, and it's kind of been that thing of like, it had its period where it was like the Attitude Era and stuff like that. Most of your school friends were into it. Now we're kind of at the stage where it's like only the real diehards have survived. What kind of kept you on the boat, so to speak?
I mean, I just love it. I've always had since I was a little kid. I think that I have that connection to it, that I grew up in this house of like all women, that my mom, my sister, my aunt, her daughter all living in the house with me. And so my kind of respite from that was that my uncle would take me to the Rosemont Horizon in Chicago, Illinois, and we would go see house shows, and I'd see Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior and Earthquake and all those things, and I just fell in love with it from then. And there was that time period where I was like, oh, girls don't seem to be into this, so I'm going to tell them I'm not into this. And I stopped watching for a bit, but then I think I also just grew up at that right time, but then I was like, oh, no girls are paying attention to me, but here's ECW, and they got boobs, and they got violence, so I guess I'm back home. And, and I just been on it ever since, just because like I truly love the artistry of it. I love, like, especially, I mean, I even went to pro wrestling school for a couple of months just to try it out. And it was what I thought it was. Like, it's just this perfect mix of like acting and grappling and like gymnastics. And I was like, oh, I'm only good at one of those things and not even that great at it. So
that's the step I've never taken personally, as I'd love to go to pro wrestling school for like even just like a couple of sessions, just to like say that I did it and like see what that's like.
Yeah, I totally recommend it, because especially as a guy who'd never done any team sports or done high school sports of that nature, like it was really fun to have like a camaraderie with people, and like the class would make you come in and shake everybody's hands every time you started class, and you really like, had to trust each other and learn each other. And by the time that I was quitting, like I had done a couple sequences where like I could tie up, put someone in a headlock, take them over, and then hit the ropes and go not leapfrog, definitely not leapfrog, but I could pass over them and do a couple of moves by the time I was like, well, I'm done with this. But it was awesome, because I was like, oh, I never thought I actually could do that. And it was also one of the most challenging things. It was like the opposite of stand-up comedy. It was the time where I understood my friend who wasn't that good at it at the beginning and still had the drive to keep it going, because I knew from class one, I was like, I am not naturally inclined to this. It is not coming to me easy like stand-up, like, but I still wanted to do it. And I would go home and sore and lay in a tub for like 30 minutes. but I still have friends from it to this day, like a couple wrestling gentlemen I really enjoy, like Tyler Bateman, who's in Ring of Honor, and Brody King as well, who's in Ring of Honor, and now they're like friends of mine because they, I came at them with respect, and they were the trainers at the class, and then they also respected me, and then later on they were both like, hey, we know who you are, but we wanted to treat you just like anybody else in the class, and I appreciated that very much.
That's amazing, man. I always kind of wonder too about the whole like naturally inclined thing, where it's like, isn't it so lucky that you found something that from the get go you're like, right, like I know that it's going to take a while to get really, really good at this, but at the same time, from the first time doing it, there's some sort of natural thing around it, and I think it's just so lucky that people get to discover that.
Yeah, it's a blessing. It's a real blessing. Not everybody gets to find their passion, and that's something I never try to forget. That I'm lucky in that, because my aunt actually, she was the one, and she was like, man, she's like, she came to one of my shows, and she was like, you have a lot of fun up there. And I was like, yeah, I do. She's like, it probably doesn't even feel like work to you. No, I was like, no, not really, to tell you the truth. And she goes like, you just probably feel like you never even work. And I was like, no, that's great. I love it. And she goes, I never felt like that a day in my life.
That's crazy. That's wild. That's such a great thing, though. That's such a great thing for her to say to you, though, is that like, it just obviously not everyone gets to experience that.
Yeah. Yeah, and understand that you're blessed in that, and I never tried. Like, 'cause I know there's some comedians, especially if they get too successful, that they start being like, why does anyone have a real job? Why don't you just believe in yourself and like do what you're supposed to? And again, I do believe in callings, and but sometimes I think people are called to be like the best freaking cashier, and especially right now, we see that's important, but that's what I believe in. Be the best you that you want to be, and be happy. Like, even when I was a cashier, that's a job I did have. I liked it because I would talk trash to people and have fun, and I didn't worry about being fast. People would just come to my line because they wanted to talk to me, and I believe in like, just enjoy where you are and what you're doing in that moment.
As a fellow cashier, I totally agree with that. Yeah, it's like I think that's important though, to like when you have kind of careers before stand up, and you can like look back and be like, oh fuck, well, if I ever complain about what I'm doing now, it's important to like look back at where you were working and how you felt emotionally there, and how things are different now. And there's always going to be problems, but like, you'd rather have problems doing what you love than something that you're not invested in.
Absolutely, that's well put. That's something I firmly believe in. Like, anytime that like I have troubles, I even thought about it with this pandemic. I even go like, wow, how lucky am I that I still like, even though I miss doing it now and I can't find a place to go up or anything, like, how lucky am I that this still would have happened? And what if I was doing something I hated at some job that I don't enjoy, and then this happened, and I would have been like, oh, I'm still fucked. Things are still so shitty. But now I'm like, oh, things are kind of weird and stuff, but like, I'm okay. My family's okay. Like, we went to Japan in January to Wrestle Kingdom, and I got to see
Damn.
Jushin Thunder Liger retire, and
That's
that was
amazing.
all through comedy, and that's beautiful to me. So I think it's highly important to know that like, bad times will happen no matter what. So you might as well, choose the life that you want to live and do the things you want to do.
Absolutely, man. It's I always think like that too as well. Whenever like, if I pay for something and I'm like, holy fuck, like stand up bought that, even if it's like a McDonald's,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, me being on stage has got me a couple of Big Macs, and that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. When you can turn your life and your traumas or what your bad day into a joke, and then turn that joke into money, I think it's one of the most magical things in the world. I love it.
Well, that's one thing I wanted to get into with your stand up is like, I love how with your comedy, it's like you're a very like positive guy through and through, which I really like, and it like translates in both your stand up and as well in your podcast, Getting Better with Ron Funches. Have you always kind of been that way in terms of like your outlook on life and stuff like that?
No, not particularly. Like, I mean, I just grew up around a lot of hardships and things. Like, I, grew up single mom in South Side of Chicago, and she ended up in an abusive relationship when I was 8 years old. That lasted into when I was 13. If you want to know the real reason why I moved to Oregon, it was to get away from that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was this time period where I kind of felt like I remember I talked to my little sister when we were little kids and something probably traumatic had happened and we were just sitting on the roof together and I was like, I think we're going through these bad things now because our lives are going to be so good when we get older that we need to earn it, that we need to have something to say that, it wasn't just given to us. And I felt like that for years. And then I got in my teens and my early 20s, and I was still just waiting for the universe to give me what it owed me. And nothing was happening. And I was getting kind of angry. And I was getting kind of becoming like a shitty guy, very much materialistic. I was in my, I was in a marriage that I shouldn't have been into and just not really doing well. And it took like a tarot reading that I accidentally went to and
No
on
way.
Halloween. Yeah.
I did the
Uh-huh.
exact same thing.
Oh, really? That's fun. I want to hear about that.
After a really like messy breakup, I went for a tarot reading.
So it was Halloween and I was going with my best friend from high school. His aunt was throwing a party and another one of his aunts was doing tarot readings and I had never done one. I've been very skeptical because I grew up in a very Catholic household. I went to Catholic school for most of my growing up in elementary. And so I was just like, well, whatever. But I was bored and I was like, okay, I'll do a reading. And she kind of just gave me this reading where she really just broke me down and was like, she's like, you've been through some shit in the past. She's like, it seems like you want to be an entertainer. She's like, I don't know what it is. I don't know if you want. And then she said it. She's like, it's just like a stand-up comedian or actor, whatever. So, but you want to do something, but you're waiting for it to be handed to you. You're waiting for someone to come find you. And that's not going to happen. And she's like, you should pursue whatever it is that you want to pursue, and things will come to you quicker than you would imagine. And it wasn't even what she said; it was also the way she said it, and this kind of like this, like she was when she pulled the card, she was kind of pissed off. She was almost like she was like, "Oh, this guy is gonna be famous," you know. Why the fuck are you coming to me with some bullshit? You're gonna be doing better than all of us.
Oh my, that's so, it's so weird how similar that is to exactly like, that's so weird. I've had the like near enough the exact same thing happen.
Tell me about yours.
So basically, again, was living in LA, and the week before I went through the breakup, I was talking to a friend who was talking about in Echo Park, there was a place like a 15-minute walk from our house, and it was like this big like black building with like it was like chalk like all around it, like advertising the business and like who was there. And apparently these people are like legit because there was like a huge waiting list and stuff like that. So I got in with like a cancellation appointment, and it was like a weekend. I was doing nothing that day, and I went to it, and kind of like this a similar type thing where you were saying, where it was like she laid out the cards, and I was the same as you. I'd never kind of leaned into this world of tarot readings and kind of stuff like that, but kind of like always weirdly enough like a spiritual enough kind of guy with like always believed in law of attraction, always believed in putting out good energy, always believed in gravitating towards things that you love. So when I went there and she started doing the reading, she was picking the cards out one by one, and sort of what you were saying, where it was like she looked annoyed with me, where she was like, you're using like relationships right now as like a distraction from what you're supposed to actually be doing. And then flicked the next card, and it was like, oh, you're like some sort of a performer. And I didn't tell her what I was. But then she like asked kind of what I was, and I was like, I'm a stand-up comedian. And she was like, that makes a lot of sense because like people who are in that sort of genre of entertainment, they feel more than the average human being. So it's like when you're happy, it's like this skyrocket kind of happiness. It's like you're almost insufferable to be around for people who aren't as happy as you. But then when you're down, it's like you really kind of focus in on things and like you lean into it and you overthink and kind of catastrophize and stuff like that. And I was like, she's got my like cheat codes. It's like, what the fuck is this? But yeah, dude, by the end of it, I felt like totally like, I just felt like a new, and you know, you'll talk to people about the readings and stuff like that. And there'll be people that, much like trying to convince someone to be a pro wrestling fan or a comedy fan, they just won't, they will never let down the walls in terms of tarot readings. But for me, whether what happened in that room was totally real or whatever, I walked out of there and felt better about the breakup, but also felt more like motivated to do what I was doing in the first place.
Yeah, no, I firmly believe in that. I believe in whatever works for you. But there was also a time period where I got too invested in it because it worked the first time, that I was like, anything that I need a question on, I need to consult the cards first. And that was not a way to live your life. You know, it's much better to be surprised and be in the moment and not overthink things. Because a lot of times you get these readings and you're like, well, what if I try to do this and I'll change it? And you're like, well, no, you got the readings because that's what's gonna happen, dude.
Yeah.
And so I've learned to like embrace it, and I still will get a reading every now and again. Like I had a big choice to make like a couple of months ago, and so I got a quick consultation. But for the most part, I'm like, I just want to live my life. If something comes up, and like, then it'll kind of come to me, you know. And but yeah, that changed my life for sure.
I feel like with me, it was like with tarot readings, I treated it like acid. And then I was like, right, I've done this once. It's been great. That's enough. Let's not chase that dragon.
That's true. It's a hole.
So you at that stage when you do the reading, are you with your current fiance at the time?
No, I was with my ex-wife at the time.
Okay. So how did you and your current fiance meet?
We met online on Bumble.
Oh,
On the
seriously?
internet. Yeah. She had one picture and a small little bio, and so I assumed that she was like a bot, that she was like you know, because the picture was really pretty, but I was like, it's just one picture, and it looked like it was like somebody had just taken it from someone's Facebook. You know, it was a little blurry. So
you thought you were getting catfished out the gate?
Yeah, for sure, for 100% for real. But I was bored and I was swiping and talking, so I was like, "Oh, I'll talk to this bot until." And her first line was kind of like robotish, where she's like, "Oh, I'm just sitting here watching the Grammys, and a perfect gentleman has appeared." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." You don't know me.
Oh my god, that's hilarious. So you guys meet in Bumble. You're both in LA at this time?
Yeah, we're both in LA. She was visiting. She's Canadian, and so we went on a couple of dates, but we didn't. I mean, we hit it off pretty well, but I had to go through some more changes and grow, and I still was very much dealing with stuff from my ex-wife and not trusting people, and I had been newly on TV shows, and so also not making me not trust new relationships, and then B, I was like, well, if you don't have sex with me on the second date, what's going on here? Like, there's a lot of girls that will.
Maybe you are a robot.
And so we kind of went our separate ways for a few months, and I dated another lady, but what she always said, and I think turned out to be probably good dating advice, is that she just really liked the way that I handled it, that I didn't ghost her. I didn't like be like, it's not working. I just told her exactly what's up. I was like, hey, I think this is another lady that I'm kind of interested in. I want to pursue that. I had a great time with you. Hopefully we can still be friends. And on her end, she just kind of stayed around. You know, she would comment on little things or say hello every now and again. And then so when me and the other lady broke up, I just kind of reached back out to her, and I just didn't really know her, especially. And it was so funny, like I was judging her off of how she looked, because she had this like body and stuff, and I was just like, oh, why do you want? You just probably want to hang around the Comedy Store. You're looking for any famous guy to try to be with, and you don't, I'm a nerd. Like I'm a nerd, and I have a son. I don't have time to like for you to play with me, And she didn't know me because I remember one of the first things she asked me was like, she was like, do you have an entourage? Blah, blah, blah. And so I thought she was into that, but she was just like, oh, she had gone on a couple of dates with other comedians, and that's the kind of guys they were, but she was not into that, and it wasn't until we just went on a date where we hung out at my house and just was like, hey, show me your favorite shows. And so she showed me some episodes of Golden Girls, and I played an episode of I Love Lucy, and then she showed me this episode of Golden Girls where they watch I Love Lucy, and I was like, oh, you're pretty cool.
Now that's a good date. Pick a show. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and I like that she liked that, because a lot of her friends were like, that sounds like a boring ass day, But for us, it was a blast, because I got to see how excited she was about her show, and she got to see how much I cared about we got to see how much we both cared about comedy, basically, and that was important for both of us. And then we just hung around and played like Super Mario 3 for like an hour or two, and she knew where all the whistles were. So I was like, I think I like this one.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
And then like in terms of like, you spoke there about like kind of in that adjustment period from sort of coming off like the stuff of your ex and things like that, and coming out from that, and then is that where you kind of had this newfound kind of like positive outlook on life itself?
No, that mostly came from that came before I even had any success in comedy. It probably came from my son, really. Okay. Yeah. Like that came from just like, well, my son's different, I'm different, we should embrace those differences. My son has autism, for people who don't know, and he was diagnosed when he was 2, and that kind of even was what got me to start stand-up, is that I was like, hey, I gotta do something as a career. This is something I've always been interested in. Again, I'm a little different. I need to, if I can't defend my differences, how am I going to defend my son's differences? So that really helped change my attitude around, and just got me thinking more positive. And it's been a learned trait, but a lot of it just came from dealing with my mom's abusive relationship, and just going like, oh, again, just that bad things are going to happen. All I can really control is my attitude. Doesn't mean that I'm always just like, oh, everything's amazing. Like I think even my comedy, like some people dismiss my comedy like that, as if it's not sharp, as if it doesn't deal with like real life situations, because I come at it from a positive situation. But I think that's harder. I think that's more fun. And I think it's just the way I always try to write, is that sometimes I look to find the positive in the bad situation.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's fantastic though, and it's beautiful that came from kind of your son, as you were saying, and it kind of gave you this whole new grounds for what you believed in and kind of your outlook. I think that's great.
Yeah, no, I owe him a lot of that. So, and it just, worked for me when I was doing stand-up originally. It just, especially when I was hosting and I was trying to do like, who's drinking, or like, stupid fucking hat, or whatever,
Yeah.
Just always sounds so phony coming out of my mouth, and I was opening for the Sklar Brothers once, and they just gave me some great advice, and they were just like, you're only doing that because you're scared that they won't accept you. And she's like, then they were like, just do your first joke, and if your first joke doesn't work, do your second joke.
Damn. Yeah, it's crazy how like I think that's a learning curve that I've kind of went through in like the past couple of years, is like just what you were saying, is like just being honest and kind of being yourself and being vulnerable when it's needed, and kind of just putting it out there. And there is like a weird kind of thing, isn't there, where it's like you don't let that happen for a while for whatever reason, and then when you do let it happen, it's like, oh, this feels so much better.
Yeah, because it's scary. Why, of course, it's you. I mean, it's already scary when it's just you up there by yourself talking about what's going on. And in the beginning, at least for me, it was like, okay, well, I need to write a type of joke. They want this type of joke or that type of joke. And then it becomes much more scary when you go like, oh, what if I stop worrying about what they want and I just start delivering what I want to give them. And so then it kind of sucks, especially when you're not as good in the beginning and they reject it because it feels like a rejection of you as a person. And it hurts.
Yeah.
So I understand why it's scary, but as you said, the more you do it, the more freeing it feels. And that's the thing I learned that really hit hard for me, which is so funny. It's hitting hard now that I remember it, is that they always laughed the most when I wasn't trying to tell a joke. They laughed the most when I told my truth, and they weren't used to it. And so, as a reaction for their awkwardness and for not being used to it, then they laugh. You know, it's not like I'm like, and I tell most of those things like Mr. Whiteface joke I did in the past, fuck Linda joke, whatever it is. Those all were the truth. You
Yeah.
know, it wasn't like I was just making things up. It was the truth, and they weren't used to that, and it made them laugh. And I found like those are like some of my favorite laughs, as opposed to like other jokes we can feel more like tricks. You know, like
Yes.
you're just trying to pull a magic trick, and you're trying to trick the audience, opposed to really showing them who you are.
Absolutely. And like, you cite him as kind of like a big inspiration for yourself, but kind of how I learned that, or like what that is even, is through Dave Chappelle. It was like the kind of, even watching like the first time seeing Kill Them Softly and being like, what the fuck? Like, you're just like, this is so ahead to me of anything I've seen yet, of
Yeah.
what I viewed. And then kind of being like, even then from there, it went on to, I watched a lot of Gerard Carmichael with like Eight and Love at the Store, and being like, I noticed kind of Hannibal Buress as well. Like the correlation was just, they were all being honest and they were all being upfront, and you really got a feel for who the person was by the end of the hour, which is, I think, what you did as well with Giggle Fit, where it's like at the end of that special, you really know who Ron Funches is.
Thank you. That's the best compliment I could receive. That makes me so happy because that's exactly that's the compliment. And I'm not, no disrespect to other styles. I think again they're just styles, but like my favorite is by the end of the set, I want to feel like I know you more, whether I want to hang out with you, be best friends with you, I disagree with you, whatever it is, I want to know more about you. And I see when, and again, it's just a different style, but I see a lot of comedy by the end of the set where I haven't learned anything about that person. Or sometimes they've given me contradictory information. Like, you know, you all see those sets where they're like, oh, me and my girlfriend did this. And then they're like, well, I went on this date. And you're just like, well, what happened to your girlfriend?
Yeah,
Did you guys break up between the two jokes?
Yeah.
You know, and so you give me contradictory information. I don't know where you stand. And I'd always like, I love that. Is just, you know, I wanted you to know more about me, but by the end of my set. So I really appreciate that. That's you said.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I got to ask as well, like, a question obviously I could not ask. Ric Flair, getting in touch with him and making that happen. How did that come about?
I mean, I've just been a huge wrestling fan for years, so I've always been around the wrestling community in some way. And the more that I was doing some stuff on TV, the more friends I would get, you know. But one of the coolest guys I know is Conrad Thompson, who does the you know, Something to Wrestle With podcast. He has the whole podcast network that he's doing, and he is Ric Flair's son-in-law, and so I just had this idea, especially when I knew it was going to be on Comedy Central and on demand, and that, like, you know, if people in other countries are going to try to watch it, they were either going to have to torrent it or buy it. And I was like, oh, I need to make sure I do everything that I want to do in a special. And so I had always loved wrestling. I love the intros of wrestling. And so I had the idea of getting this robe already. And I got in the robe and all that stuff together. And then I was like, man, what I would really love is to have Ric Flair intro my special. And it was just the idea. And I was like, let me text Conrad, see if he would, like, how much money it would cost, if he would even be willing to do that. And then I text Conrad and I just pitch him the idea of like, oh, Ric Flair is my spiritual advisor, da, 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 da. And then he just writes back, well, he's sitting right next to me. We're at a football game. He says he's in.
Man, the fucking universe, like, that is insane.
Yeah.
The odds of that coming through in those exact circumstances are just mind-blowing.
Yeah, for it to just work out that quickly and that easily. And then, I mean, there were some hiccups in the middle because, it was, we taped that kind of like during the end of one of his health scares. And so he was getting ready to go into surgery. So originally he was going to fly out to LA and we were going to do a whole scene. But then he couldn't fly anymore. And so we changed it to him being on green screen from Atlanta. And I think it made it better because we had this whole idea of him like kicking a door down and doing all that stuff. And I was like, I don't think he might have been able to do that. It's much better if he's like this floating head just going around. And I just remember the first time when he goes like, getting your dick sucked by the pilot. And then he goes like, oh, I don't know if I could say that. But it's like, no, you nailed it, man. I think you know how to say it. I think it might have happened to you.
Yeah, that's not foreign territory for you from how you've done that. Dude, that's amazing. Yeah, it's crazy how, like, he's became so... Like, you could like never have seen a pro wrestling match in your life, and you know who Ric Flair is.
Yeah, no, he's legendary, and that's why I feel like that was also. It's so funny that you brought up killing them softly, because that's probably top two of my favorite specials. And when I was I could do vision boards and things, and when I was getting ready to prep for my special, I put a picture of two different specials that I wanted to emulate, and one was Killing Them Softly and the other one was New in Town from John Mulaney. And so I just was really focusing on that and trying to get everything I wanted. And man, getting Rick was what even happened better from having Rick on the intro is that his wife invited me to his 70th birthday party, and I got to go to that in Atlanta and shake hands with Ricky Steamboat. Shook hands with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. I mean, everybody was there. I met Charles Barkley there.
Not the first guest I would have guessed, but that's mega cool.
And he was so cool because he just goes, Rick was like, well, let me introduce you, my friend. He's like, and I was like, he's like, this is a great comedian, Ron Funches. And he goes, hi, Ron, I'm Charles Barkley. And I was like, yeah, man, I know you. Everybody knows who you are.
Everyone's heard crazy. Do you know what I mean? Dude, that's phenomenal. I had no idea that like he invited you or his wife invited you into the birthday and stuff. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, it was great. Great family, just cool people to work with. They're super nice. That's man, I love finding that out because it's like just like in comedy, similar to wrestling. It's so weird that like the people who are legends in the business, people who are like the highest of the people I respect are also kind of like the nicest, coolest people. Like Ric Flair has been nothing but nice and cool. Stone Cold Steve Austin drove to my house in a Ford Fiesta and did my podcast. And then sometimes you talk to these like middle of the road wrestlers and they're like, who are you? I don't know. I don't want to know. I don't want to do that. And it's just like, are you serious? Like Stone Cold Steve Austin said yes. You think you're busier than him? Like,
dude, I totally agree, especially with like the fact like I actually met Chappelle
by like it was like a thing of mine, same as yourself. Like I'd be mega into like vision boards and stuff like that, and like kind of thinking things out and like seeing it, visualizing it, believing it, kind of holding it in yourself, and like carrying through life, but at the same time always having in the back of your head the things that you really want to have happen within the next couple of years. And I remember it wasn't even whenever I was living in LA, because that whole year I had tried to go to one of those like famous comedy store nights where at like 2 o'clock in the morning Chappelle would come and like do like an hour or 2 hours and just like smoke and drink. And I remember
that's fun the first time you go through it, but you go through that 3 or 4 times when you trying to go up and do your set, it loses its interest.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine. But like
the first time it happened to me, I was swear to God, I stayed the whole night. I loved it. Donald Glover was there smoking weed.
Oh my God.
Room. It was magical. It was a magical LA night, but it was the first time. But then it happened 2 or 3 more times, and I was like, "Can y'all just call me, let me know?" So I didn't have to drive all the way over.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I never thought about it from the perspective of other comics who might be getting booked or something.
I had to follow him once.
Oh my God.
After he did 40 fucking minutes.
What? How did you even open?
I was just like, well, you guys aren't going to like this as much. And that was probably the biggest laugh I got of that set.
That's hilarious, dude. But Chappelle, I remember like trying that whole year to go to one of those shows and like, spending money, like the last couple of dollars I had from work that week on like an Uber that would get me to the store and enough to get into the original room and then back to my home, and never happened. And I was like, fuck, I'm never going to see Chappelle. And then last November, the Comedy Store had put up like on their email list where they were like, we have a surprise headliner tonight coming in to do whatever in the belly room. So I immediately bought a ticket and went with my friend Josh. And when we got down there, I remember there was like 5 people opening and stuff like that. They really kept the tension bubbling over the whole time. And then like Chappelle came out and I was like, this is fucking mind blowing. And he did like 2 hours of like, didn't he, like, for me, I was like more of a fan of it because most of it didn't seem like, like bits. It was just him talking to the audience and like free falling the whole time. And I was like, this is incredible.
Yeah, it's really fun. Especially it's fun to see it as a comedian when it's not sharp, when you're like, oh, fuck, like I could get it to that point, and then you're like, well, then you get to watch like what he does to sharpen it up. And then it kind of like helps you as a comedian think of what you have to do. Yeah, I love it when you get to see the unfinished product of what he's doing, because sometimes by the end of it, you're like, holy shit, how did he get to this?
But on the subject of you saying about the nicest people seem to be like top tier, like I got to meet him after and like told him I was a comic from Ireland and like a huge fan, and kind of like how literally Killing Them Softly just kind of changed everything for me personally. And he was so nice and so accommodating, and was like he asked me, do you want to take a photo and stuff like that? Because I was like, I can't ask Dave Chappelle for a photograph. And then when he asked, I was like, this is so fucking cool,
Yeah, made you feel more comfortable. Yeah, no, I had several stories like that with him where he's always been really nice to other comedians. And I can tell you a story about following him. I got to open for him in Montreal at like one of his very first, like before the specials, before all that, like one of his very first, like I'm back shows. And he wanted to get a young black opener, and he had already had Hannibal and he had somebody else. And so I had just finished the set, and I was lucky. I just came back to my room, and it was like, oh, I'm not going to go hang out with people. I'm just going to go to my room and take a nap. And I literally am laying down. I get this phone call, and they're like, hey, they want Dave Chappelle, obviously, I don't know if he didn't directly ask for me, but they were just like, Dave Chappelle wants to know if you want to open for him. And I was like, fuck yeah. Put on my clothes, ran out, got to that stadium, and it was like 3,000 people who all wanted to see Dave Chappelle so much. And it was one of the best sets I ever had, because I was there that whole weekend opening for John Mulaney. And so I was used to the big rooms. I was used to people not wanting to see me. And so I was just like, and I just opened like that. And I go, guys, look, I was honest. I was just honest. I was like, I'm as excited as you are. I want to see Dave Chappelle too. Trust me. He's right back there. I want to see him too. But in order to see him, we got to get through my jokes. Perfect. And I got them on my side. And by the end of my set, I'm sure no one had forgotten Dave Chappelle's there. But by the end of my set, it turned into a regular set. You know, they were listening. They were on board with me. And they gave me a fucking big applause break when I was done. And so I never felt better as a comedian, because I was like, oh, for 5 minutes, I made them forget about him. You know, like,
it's crazy.
Yes. And they very much, at the beginning of that set, they were going to be like, oh, we're just going to keep talking until he gets here, you know? And I got them to shut up and listen to me and get on my side in 5 minutes. And I still think it's one of the best work I've ever done.
That's amazing, man. And I've definitely been on the opposite of that, where it's like, they don't give a fuck, and I haven't succeeded in getting them on my side.
Oh, yeah, no, that's how I got there, by going through that several times. And then several times after that.
Dude, it's just like, even with relation to that, and kind of in life in general, it's so strange how it's like, you kind of have to go through like some shit of some description that kind of like I was listening to, and I talked about this last time too with Rob, but I was listening to Pete Holmes's audiobook. Mm-hmm. And I would kind of cite you two in kind of the same, where it's like, you're both very positive and choose to focus on the positives about what you get to do and stuff like that. And I was like, I would binge You Made It Weird when I was in high school, and just like loved it. And it was actually kind of what made me want to start podcasting in general. But I remember him talking about, like, he was saying that he looks at his life like a TV show, where it's like he's the main character, but he's almost slightly detached from it, where he's able to look at himself, and you have like really bad episodes, and you have like amazing episodes that you'll replay in your head for all time to come. But in the bad episodes, he's like, fuck, like, how's Pete going to come back from this? Because there's more good episodes to come.
Yeah, that sounds very egotistical and very Pete Holmes-like. That life is just a TV show he's the star of.
It's not the Truman Show, it's the Holmes Show.
It's the Holmes Show. Yeah, but I like the positivity of that. Yeah, Pete. Oh, I love Pete, but that definitely sounds like him.
Yeah, but you're kind of like the same in terms of like your positivity is very infectious, you know, like even listening to Getting Better, and like you ask the questions that I would love to ask comedians as well, where it's like, you know, what is it that, like, I love how every episode you start off with like telling the person what you really like about them, because it just like kind of it immediately gets the guest in the point where it's like they're just like very comfortable. They understand that they're with someone who isn't going to ask anything that's like going to put them in a bad light. They trust you, and they're like happy to be on the show, like from the get-go. So yeah.
Thank you for noticing that. But yeah, I like to do it just because I feel in this business, especially with comedians, like some of the most, like, as far as, which is so weird because they're often very egotistical, but like some of the most like undeserving of their credits and the things that they've done, you know, like other people are so much like musicians or actors especially are so much like, look at what I did this, I did that. Comedians are never really like that, and I like shining a light on people and being like, man, I love this about you, I love that you did this, I love also that this is about you as a person. But especially, yeah, when it comes to the interview style, it really makes them relax. It lets them know that I know them and that I've done research, especially if it's one of our first times talking. And it makes them, like you said, just calm down and be like, hey, you don't have to sell anything. You don't have to shill anything. You don't have to worry about me asking you I might ask you some hard questions. It's so fun. One of my favorite things is when people in the middle of my interviews will be like, oh, you almost made me cry. Like, yes, I got you.
Is it that's literally like something I was talking about to a friend of mine, where it's like when you're talking to someone in the format of like podcast interview type thing, it was like having Rob on, who's like been a childhood hero of mine, and like talking to him and listening to him open up with his battles of like depression and stuff like that in 2016. And obviously you're like in the conversation and you're so there and present listening to someone open up like this, but part of you in the back of your brain's like, I can't believe he's fucking doing this talking to me.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, I had some really fun conversations with like Bobcat Goldthwait, where he kind of, which he just seemed like he just needed to talk, because I had asked him to come on and he was busy, and then he was just like, hey, can I come on this week? And so I was like, oh, it sounds like he needs to talk. And he did. It seemed like he was working on a documentary about a friend that he had lost, and he was going through all that footage. And so it was really upsetting him. And I think he was still upset about Robin Williams passing and all that type of stuff. And so it was cool, because it really kind of just turned into this two people having this conversation, where he gave me all this information and all these stuff about like heroes of mine that I had never met. And then at the end of it, I'm just like, holy shit, like this is a whole podcast that a lot of people can listen to. And those are some of my favorites. And that's also one thing I love about the podcast, is that we get some really big guests and some good guests, but like we also get some of the smaller guests on there. And I can always see it in the numbers that people are usually looking for names, But like some of those smaller guest episodes have some of the best advice that I've ever received, and some of the best lessons I've learned. And I always think it's really fun that like some people will be like, are quick to go listen to like the Jim Jeffries episode, but I'm like, no, you should check out this episode with Dr. Alfie. Like,
absolutely. I think it's like, and that's what got me into kind of like podcasting in the first place. Is like right now, this is for me like a solo podcast that I do kind of each week. And then I started the Fuck It Friday thing actually came from my friend Peter, who is currently an editor, and he works for Netflix. And he was like, I'm taking this time right now to every Friday I send an email, where it's like when you have the same fear when you used to text a girl on a date, and you would like nearly throw the phone across the room because you couldn't look at it. But he's like, it's the same thing. It's like, during normal life, you might not have never dreamed of asking these people to, hang out or talk or, ask for some advice in your field. But he's like, right now, it's like everyone's at home and people do want to help. It's just that you have to kind of put yourself out there and, be open to receiving the help in the first place.
Yeah, that's very true. It's always, you gotta meet the universe halfway. It's always put it. Nothing's gonna just be given to you. You make the effort, and things seem to work out. And yeah, I mean, with this podcast, I was just like, oh, you seem fun. It was really great conversation. And all I had to do was get online and spend the 15 minutes, go, oh, do I really want to get off of Call of Duty to go do this podcast with a guy I never met before? And that's why I was late. I played one more match. And
Warzone, yeah?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I was playing regular multiplayer this morning, because I get in the Warzone in the afternoon when I got like an hour of chunk to just play,
It's good to have a schedule.
It is.
And what is it? Because I do find that like to be the main kind of want for me in starting podcasting with people and like interviewing people and talking to people is it's like when you say it's when you get into a really nice conversation with people and you're thinking like there's going to be people that will listen to this and it's going to make them feel not alone, like the people will be speaking thoughts that they've thought about themselves, maybe they don't talk to people about. And that was kind of my thing as well, is I would have so many deep conversations with people and think, fuck me, if like other people knew about this it would really help them out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and mostly like with my podcast, with Getting Better, it was that I wanted to do something like still positive, still similar to my comedy, but even like something that deeper that I wasn't doing on stage. And it actually kind of helped change some of my stuff on stage, where sometimes I'll do affirmations on stage, and just because this is what I was like off stage. And so I wanted to just bring that out and be more me and talk about the things I like, which are positivity, goal setting, believing in yourself, just knowing that you're always going to be a constant work in progress. And those are things that I wanted to talk about and things that I didn't see other comedy podcasts doing. And so I was like, well, that's my niche then. And it's been really great because I've been getting so much great feedback about the podcast that's more than just like, oh, you're so funny, or great guests. Like I'll get feedback like, oh, I've started going to therapy. Like,
Yeah.
my favorite one I've ever gotten. I got this one from the lady who was like, oh, I listened to that episode with you and Whitney Cummings, and it made me leave my abusive boyfriend. And I was like, holy shit, like that's an insane positive, that's all I want to do is be a positive force in the world. And that's an extreme positive.
Yeah, it's great because it's like you put it out and you don't know how it's going to correlate with someone else's life.
Yeah, no, I mean, and for a lot of people, it doesn't, that's what I also like about it is some people are like, oh, I thought you were really funny. This podcast is preachy and boring. And I'm like, well, it's not for you. It's not meant for you. You're not ready. Like you said with wrestling, like you're not ready to understand it. You'll never get it. The people who do get it are the people that it's for, and they need it, and they want it. And I'd rather do that than try to chase everyone.
So that's actually a question that I personally would like to ask you is like with the podcast, and you say that like, you get some amazing feedback and like you get to see people that are, changing their lives according to audio they're listening to that you put out. But also on the other side, you have people who kind of don't get it and stuff like that. How do you personally deal with maybe negative feedback?
It's been a journey. It used to really bother me, and I get in Twitter fights and stuff like that. To the point my fiance was like, "We need to get you off Twitter." And so she's been a real plus in that. But it really, I started working on this mindset of like not searching out the praise, like, because to me, like it's a deal you make that if you want the praise, you have to take the criticism. And so I kind of started like, well, what if I don't want either? Like then it's just me working. Then it's me just, oh, did it suck? Well, okay, I'm gonna try next week to be better because that was my plan anyway. Oh, was it great? Oh, well, cool, but I'm still going to try next week to make it better because that was the plan. And so I started in this mindset of like, oh, quit looking on Twitter or Instagram for the praise and quit looking for the negative. Just do it. It's my job to create. It's not my job to interpret if it was good or if you liked it or if whatever you get out of it. That's not my fucking job. My job is to create. And so I just want to do my job.
That's amazing, man. And I have two final questions for you before we end this. What are two goals, I'll say two, that you have right now that you're kind of working towards and kind of, progressing life through with them in mind? Two goals.
Well, one goal is I've always wanted to make a show about my son and I, about being a single parent of a son with autism. and constantly working on that, riding towards that. That's been a goal for like the last, since I moved to LA, really. It's been in constant states of development and sold and passed on and resold and all that type of stuff. So it's teaching me a lot of patience, teaching me, but also I think like everything will work out in perfect timing. Like if it were to happen a couple years ago, people would have been like, who the fuck is this guy? I don't know this guy at all. Like, but in the meantime, I'm still going and doing all my other things, doing the Trolls, doing Harley Quinn, doing whatever it is, so to keep raise my value, raise my position, so that when this show, whenever it comes out, that people aren't like, I think a lot of times we see that with shows. Like I taught that with Whitney Cummings about her show, that like there wasn't like, her show was no better or worse than any show, but people had this violent reaction to it because they had not heard of her until she was being forced down your throat. Mm-hmm. And then anytime that happens, your immediate thing is to go like, no, I don't like that person. No, you don't tell me I like that person, And so I looked at that and was like, oh, I have to introduce myself slowly over and over to people, whether it is my podcast, whether it's guesting on shows, whether it's doing small roles in movies. But whatever I do, I just try to be memorable. Like even like I was in some small cameo in this Michael Bay film, Six Underground, and I would get all these like things back like, oh man, you stole that, you were in there 30 seconds, you stole that movie. And I'm just like, yeah, this is exactly what I want people to keep being like, oh, you should be in more, you should be in more. And then like, well, here's more. Like, yeah. So that's one thing I'm always working on. The second thing is just I just want to get married to my fiance and have a good relationship, and that's a constant, like, just maintaining and making sure that we don't let past relationships and past childhood traumas turn us against each other, or the quarantine or any of that type of stuff. It's just a constant battle to remember that, we're on each other's side, and I'm kind of much better when she's with me and looking out for me. So, and her as well with me. So.
That's amazing, man. I can't wait to watch this back when both those things are reality and be like, fuck, he like spoke it into existence.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm just trying to be a black Billy Crystal, be a real unconventional leading man.
And my final question to you, which I ask everyone that comes on here, is if you could go back to yourself 10 years ago and you get to see 10 years ago Ron, and you get to give him one piece of advice before you kind of vaporize back into the future, what's the one thing you'd say to yourself?
Okay, so 10 years ago, so I'm 27. Probably it would just be don't hold on to things that aren't working just because you want to change things, because my dad wasn't around, and you're just doing things out of a sense of obligation. Don't, never give of yourself out of a sense of obligation. Always do what you want to do, and give with a sense of happiness, and give because you want to give. And probably to invest in like Tesla or some stuff like that.
Nice. Well, dude, thank you. I can't thank you enough for just fucking taking the chance and doing this. And I really appreciate it. And I'm a big fan of yours, and, listen to your podcast all the time, seen your special, thought it was amazing. And it's a real pleasure. And I'm very grateful to have you on here. So thank you so much.
Oh, it was a real pleasure. It's nice to make new friends. It doesn't happen all the time, and it's a pleasure talking with you. I hope we get to talk again some more. Hopefully, we'll be able to share a stage together one day. I would love that.
Absolutely, man. And tell everyone where to find you.
Oh, you can find me Twitter at Ron Funches, Instagram Ron Funch. My podcast is called Getting Better with Ron Funches. I love doing that. I'm on the new, I think Harley Quinn just started debuting out there, which was because I did another interview. So I think you guys got Harley Quinn, where I play King Shark. And I think I have a show coming out on Quibi. I don't know. Do you guys have Quibi?
No, we don't.
It's okay. You're not missing out on nothing. So just check out my podcast, watch Harley Quinn. and just look out for me on my comedy, please.
Amazing, man. Thank you so much.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Laters.